You want to know how assumption becomes fact. You want to know the exact moment the invisible hardens into the visible, when thought becomes thing, when the unseen crystallizes into solid circumstance. You've heard it said that if you assume something, it will come to pass. But perhaps you've assumed and nothing seemed to happen, or it flickered into view and dissolved again, or you grew tired of holding the feeling and let it go before it could ripen into fact. Tonight I want to show you something Neville Goddard taught with absolute certainty, something he proved again and again in his own life and in the lives of thousands who listened to him. He said, "Assume it, and it will harden into fact. Not might, not could, will." But there is a secret in that statement, a timing, a rhythm, a process of crystallization that most people abandon too soon. They assume for a day, a week, perhaps a month, and when the outer world does not immediately rearrange itself to match their inner conviction, they conclude the law does not work. But the law is always working. The hardening is always occurring. And the question is not whether your assumption will become fact, but whether you will persist in that assumption long enough for it to complete its journey from the invisible into the visible, into the visible. Neville spoke of this process as though he were describing something as natural and inevitable as water freezing into ice, as liquid gold poured into a mold and left to cool and solidify. The shape is determined the moment the gold is poured, but the hardening takes time. The form is set, but the substance must settle, must cool, must pass through stages of becoming before it can be touched, held, and called real by the outer senses. Your assumption is that, molten gold. The mold is the feeling you persist in, and the hardening, the crystallizing into fact, is guaranteed, provided you do not break the mold, provided you do not pour the gold out again in doubt and start over with a new shape every other day. Welcome. If you're new to this channel, we explore the teachings of Neville Goddard, one of the most profound mystics and teachers of the 20th century. Every episode is an invitation to test these principles in your own experience, to prove to yourself that consciousness is the only reality and that the world you see is nothing more and nothing less than your own assumptions pushed out into visible, tangible form. In this episode, we're going to go deep into the core law, the law that governs all manifestation, all change, all transformation. We're going to talk about what it really means to assume, what happens in consciousness when you do, and how long it actually takes for that assumption to harden into fact. Neville gave a very specific answer to that question, and I'll share it with you exactly as he said it. By the end of this episode, you will understand not only how to assume, but how to persist in your assumption until the outer world has no choice but to conform. Let's begin. Assumption is not wishful thinking. Assumption is not wishful thinking. It is not hoping, wanting, or trying to believe. Assumption is the act of occupying a state. Neville said it over and over, in lecture after lecture, that consciousness is the only reality. You are not a body with a consciousness. You are consciousness. And the body, the world, the circumstances you find yourself in are simply the outpicturing of the state you are occupying in consciousness. To assume is to enter into a state as though it were already true, and to remain in that state until the outer facts conform to the inner feeling. Let me give you an example, one that Neville himself told many times. A woman came to him and said she wanted to be married. She was not married, she had no prospects. She was, by all outer appearances, alone. Neville did not tell her to go out and meet people. He did not tell her to change her appearance, to join a club, to put herself in situations where marriage might become more likely. He told her to assume the feeling of being a married woman, not the feeling of wanting to be married, not the hope of being married someday, but the feeling of already being married someday, but the feeling of already being married now. He instructed her to sleep every night, wearing an imaginary wedding ring, to feel the weight of it on her finger, to turn it absent-mindedly as married women do, to feel the presence of a husband beside her, to live inwardly from the end, from the state of the wish fulfilled. She did this. Night after night she fell asleep in the assumption that she was a married woman, and within a matter of months circumstances arranged themselves in such a way that she met a man, fell in love, and married him. The outer world, which had shown her no sign of a husband, rearranged itself completely to match the inner state she had persisted in. Now you might say, that's a nice story. But how do I know it's true? How do I know assumption really works? And my answer is the same as Neville's. Try it. Do not take my word for it. Do not take Neville's word for it. Do not take Neville's word for it. Test it. Assume something small, something that does not matter deeply to you. Something you will receive a phone call from a specific person. Assume you will see a particular object, something unusual, something you would not normally encounter. Assume it. Feel it as done. And then watch as the world delivers it to you. Neville told of a woman who wanted to test the law, so she assumed she would see a single purple orchid. She had no reason to expect such a thing. Purple orchids were not common in her life, but she persisted in the assumption. She imagined herself looking at a purple orchid, feeling pleased and satisfied that her assumption had hardened into fact. Within days, her daughter brought home a purple orchid from school. The outer world conformed. It always does. But here is where most people stumble. They assume something once, or they assume it loosely, or they assume it only when they remember to, and then they look at the outer world and say, "See, it didn't work." But assumption is not a single act. It is a state you occupy. It is a dwelling place. Neville used the word state very deliberately. You do not visit an assumption. You move into it. You take up residence there. You live from it. Think of it this way. Right now, you are assuming 1,000 things without even knowing it. You assume you are the person you believe yourself to be. You assume you live in the place you live, that you have the relationships you have, that you assume you live in the place you live, that you have the relationships you have, that you have the relationships you have, that you have the retes. You do not have to try to assume these things. You simply do. They are the state you occupy. And because you occupy that state naturally, effortlessly, continuously, the outer world reflects it back to you continuously. The world is not something separate from you, something you must convince or cajole or manipulate into giving you what you want. The world is yourself pushed out. It is the mirror, and you are what stands before it. So when you want to change the reflection, you do not reach into the mirror and try to rearrange the image. You change what stands before the mirror. You change the state you are occupying. You assume a new state, and you persist in that assumption until the mirror has no choice but to reflect the change. Neville said, "You are told, assume the feeling of your wish fulfilled." But what does that mean? It means you imagine the situation you desire, and you enter into the feeling that you would have if that situation were already a fact. You do not imagine in order to get something. You imagine in order to become someone. You become the one to whom that thing is already true. And when you are that one, the thing must appear. Let me take you into this more deeply. Every state has a feeling. The state of being wealthy has a feeling. The state of being loved has a feeling. The state of the state of being healthy, of being recognized, of being free, each has its own unique feeling. And you know these feelings. You have tasted them before, even if only briefly. Perhaps you have felt wealthy when you received an unexpected sum of money. Perhaps you have felt loved in a moment of deep connection. Perhaps you have felt loved in a moment of deep connection. Perhaps you have felt the relief and freedom of perfect health after recovering from illness. You know the feeling, and the feeling is the secret. Neville said over and over, feeling is the secret. Not visualizing, not affirming, not pretending. Feeling. Because feeling is the language of the subconscious, and the subconscious is the womb in which all outer facts are gestated. When you feel something to be true, you impress that feeling upon the subconscious, and the subconscious, which is infinitely creative and utterly obedient, begins to arrange circumstances, events, and encounters to match the feeling you have impressed upon it. This is not magic. This is law. It is the law of consciousness. Consciousness is cause. The outer world is effect. You are not trying to make something happen. You are simply claiming the state that corresponds to your desire, and the outer world, which is nothing but consciousness made visible, must reflect that state. But how long does it take? This is the question everyone asks. How long must I persist in my assumption before it hardens into fact? This is the question everyone asks. How long must I persist in my assumption? Neville answered this question very directly, and his answer may surprise you. He said that the length of time it takes for an assumption to harden into fact depends entirely on the naturalness and ease with which you wear the assumption. If you can assume a thing and feel no contradiction, no doubt, no inner argument against it, it will come to pass very quickly. If, on the other hand, you assume something while still feeling that it is not true, while still identifying with the old state, The hardening will take longer, because you are working against yourself. You are pouring the gold into the mold, and then shaking the mold, and then pouring it out and starting over. He also said, and this is critically important, that an assumption, though false if persisted in, will harden into fact. Let me repeat that. An assumption, though false, if persisted in, will harden into fact. It does not matter if the outer world contradicts your assumption. It does not matter if every circumstance you see denies what you are assuming. If you persist, if you continue to occupy that state, the outer world must yield. The outer world has no choice. It is not a separate entity with its own will. It is your consciousness made visible. Neville told a story about a man who wanted a particular job. The job had been offered to someone else. Every outer fact said this man would not get the job, but he assumed he had the job. He lived from the end. He imagined himself doing the work, receiving the paycheck, being congratulated on his new position. He did not imagine in order to get the job. He imagined in order to be the one who already had the job. And he persisted in that assumption, despite all evidence to the contrary. Within weeks, the person who had been offered the job turned it down, and the position was offered to him. The outer facts rearranged themselves to match his inner state. This is what Neville meant when he said the world is yourself pushed out. You are not manipulating the world, you are simply being a certain one, and the world, which is your own consciousness in visible form, reflects that one back to you. But you must persist. You must wear the assumption as you would wear a suit of clothes, naturally, comfortably, without effort. When you first put on a new suit, you might feel awkward. You might be aware of it. But if you wear it long enough, it becomes yours. You forget you are wearing it. It becomes natural. This is what must happen with your assumption. At first, you may have to remind yourself. You may have to reconsciously return to the feeling of the wish fulfilled. But if you persist, there comes a moment when the assumption is no longer something you are trying to hold. It is simply what you are. And when that happens, the outer world shifts suddenly and completely to match it. Neville said, "Do not be concerned with how it will happen. Do not look for signs. Do not check every day to see if it is manifesting. You do not dig up a seed to see if it is growing. You plant it, and you trust the law. You assume the state of the wish fulfilled, and you let the law do its work. How long does it take? It takes as long as it takes for you to become natural in the assumption. For one person, that might be a day. For another, a month. For another, longer. But the time is not spent waiting for the thing to come. The time is spent becoming the one to whom the thing has already come. And when you are that one, it is done." Now let's talk about the hardening process itself, because this is where the mystical becomes practical, where the invisible becomes visible. Neville spoke of this process using many metaphors. He compared it to a seed planted in the ground. You do not see it growing, but beneath the surface the seed is germinating. Roots are spreading, a stem is forming, and then, one day, the shoot breaks through the soil, and what was invisible becomes visible. But it was always growing. It was always hardening into fact. He also compared it to pregnancy. A woman conceives, and for months there is no outer sign, but within her the child is forming, developing, becoming, and then at the appointed time the child is born. The invisible becomes visible. So it is with your assumption. You conceive it in imagination. You feel the wish fulfilled, and that conception begins a process of gestation that must complete itself. You do not see it happening, but it is happening. The assumption is hardening. The invisible is becoming visible. Neville said that the length of time it takes for an assumption to harden into fact is the interval between the impression and the expression. The impression is the moment you assume the state. The expression is the moment the outer world reflects that state. And the interval between the two depends on the depth of your conviction and the absence of counter-assumptions. Let me explain what I mean by counter-assumptions. Most people assume what they want with one part of their mind while assuming its opposite with another part. They assume they are wealthy while still feeling poor. They assume they are loved while still feeling rejected. They assume they are loved while still feeling rejected. They assume they are successful while still identifying with failure. This is double-mindedness, and it delays the hardening. It is like pouring gold into a mold with a crack in it. The gold leaks out. The form never fully sets. To assume something powerfully, To assume it in such a way that it must harden into fact, you must drop all counter-assumptions. You must cease to be the one who lacks the thing and become the one who has it. You must cease to be the one who is waiting for the thing and become the one for whom the thing is already a present fact. This is what Neville meant when he said, "Live in the end. Do not live in the middle, in the wishing, in the waiting. Live in the end, in the place where the desire is already fulfilled." When you do this, when you occupy that state naturally and continuously, the hardening happens of its own accord. You do not have to force it. You do not have to push. You simply remain faithful to the state, and the state externalizes itself. Neville told a story that I find very moving. A woman came to him in tears. Her husband had left her. He was living with another woman. She wanted him back, but she was consumed with fear and anger and resentment. Neville asked her, "What would it feel like if you were home right now?" She closed her eyes and imagined it. She felt the relief, the peace, the joy of having her husband beside her again. Neville told her, "Go home, and every night before you fall asleep, imagine he is lying next to you. Feel him there. Hear him breathing. Reach out and touch him in your imagination. Do this every night until it feels completely natural." She did. At first it was difficult. Her mind resisted. But she persisted. Night after night she fell asleep feeling her husband beside her. And after several weeks something shifted in her. She no longer felt desperate. She no longer felt abandoned. She felt whole. She felt as though he were already home, and that feeling was so real to her that she stopped worrying about when it would happen. She simply knew it was done. And then, one evening, her husband knocked on the door. He said he did not know why, but he had to come home. He could not stay away. He had tried, but something in him would not let him. He was home. The assumption had hardened into fact. This is the law. This is how it works. You do not change the outer world, you change your inner state, and the outer world, which has no choice in the matter, rearranges itself to match your inner state. But you must persist. You must live in the assumption until it becomes natural. And when it becomes natural, it becomes fact. Now let me give you something practical, something you can do tonight. This is the technique Neville called the state akin to sleep, or SATS. It is the most powerful method he ever taught for impressing the subconscious with the feeling of the wish fulfilled. Here is how you do it. Tonight, as you lie down to sleep, close your eyes and relax your body. Let go of the day. Let go of the outer world. Now bring to mind the thing you desire. Do not think about how you will get it. Do not think about whether it is possible. Simply ask yourself, what would it feel like if I already had this? What would I be experiencing right now if my desire were already a present fact? Now construct a short, simple scene that implies the fulfillment of your desire. If you desire a new home, imagine yourself standing in that home, feeling the satisfaction of ownership. If you desire a relationship, imagine someone congratulating you on your happiness. If we desire success in your work, imagine receiving a phone call or an email that confirms your success. Keep the scene very short, no more than a few seconds, and loop it in your imagination over and over. But here is the key. Do not just visualize it. Feel it enter into the feeling of the wish fulfilled. Feel the relief, the naturalness of it being done. Let your body respond to the imagined scene as though it were physically real. If the scene makes you smile, smile. If it makes you sigh with relief, sigh. Let the feeling saturate you. And as you loop this scene, as you feel the reality of it, you will begin to drift into sleep. This is the moment when the impression is made most powerfully, when the conscious mind releases its grip, and the subconscious is open and receptive. You are planting a seed in the most fertile soil there is, the state akin to sleep, the borderland between waking and sleeping, where the subconscious is most impressionable. Do this every night. Not with strain, not with effort, but with the simple, easy feeling that it is done. And if during the day you find yourself doubting, if you find yourself slipping back into the old state, do not fight it. Simply return to the feeling. Remind yourself of the scene you impressed upon your subconscious the night before. Live from that state as much as you can. You may not see results immediately. You may see no outer change for days or even weeks. But do not be discouraged. The hardening is happening. The assumption is crystallizing. You are not waiting for something to happen. You are becoming the one to whom it has already happened. And when you are that one, it will appear. there is something I want you to understand at a deeper level. This is not just about getting things. This is not a technique for acquiring possessions or manipulating circumstances. It is a revelation of who and what you are. You are not a person in the world hoping for better circumstances. You are consciousness itself, and the world is your own wonderful human imagination pushed out into sensory form. When you assume something, you are not asking the universe to give it to you. You are claiming it as your own because it is your own, because there is nothing outside of you. Neville said you are told to believe in Jesus Christ, but Jesus Christ is not a man who lived 2,000 years ago. Jesus Christ is your own wonderful human imagination, and to believe in him is to trust your imagination above all outer evidence. When you imagine something and feel it to be real, you are exercising the creative power of God within you. You are not a beggar before the throne of a distant God. You are the operant power. You are the one who creates. And when you understand this, when you really take it in, everything changes. You stop looking outside yourself for permission, for validation, for proof that you deserve the thing you desire. You stop waiting for circumstances to change so that you can feel differently. You feel differently now, and the circumstances must change. This is what Neville meant when he said, "Dare to assume the feeling of your wish fulfilled." It is a daring act because it defies the evidence of the senses. It defies reason. It defies the collective agreement that the outer world is the cause and you are the effect. But when you dare to assume, when you claim the state that corresponds to your desire and persist in that state, the outer world must bow. It has no power to resist. It is nothing but your own consciousness in disguise. Let me take you even deeper now. There is a rhythm to this process, a rhythm that Neville spoke of often, but that many people overlook. He said that your assumption, if persisted in, will harden into fact, but the time it takes is determined by the degree of conviction with which you hold it, and the absence of any competing assumptions. So the question is, how do you develop that conviction? How do you eliminate competing assumptions? The answer is repetition and saturation. You must return to the feeling of the wish fulfilled again and again until it is more real to you than the outer facts. You must saturate your consciousness with that feeling until it becomes your default state, until it is what you return to naturally, effortlessly, without thought. Neville gave an example of a man who wanted to go to Barbados. He had no money, no ticket, no means of getting there, but he assumed he was in Barbados. He had no money, no ticket, no means of getting there. Every night he imagined himself in Barbados, feeling the tropical air, hearing the sound of the ocean, seeing the palm trees. He did this night after night. And during the day, whenever he thought of Barbados, he did not think of it as something he wanted. He thought of it as something he was experiencing. He lived from the end, and then, one day, a friend called him and said, "I have an extra ticket to Barbados, and I want you to come with me. Everything is paid for." The assumption had hardened into fact, but notice the man did not spend his time figuring out how he would get to Barbados. He did not make plans. He did not worry. He simply assumed he was there, and the means appeared. This is the way the law works. You assume the end. You feel the end. You live from the end, and the means, the how, the bridge of incidents that will carry you from here to there, arranges itself. You do not have to know how. You do not have to see the path. You simply have to be the one who has already arrived. But here is what stops most people. They assume something, and then they test it. They look at the outer world and say, "Is it here yet?" And when they do not see it, they conclude the assumption is not working. But this is backwards. The assumption is not something you do in order to change the outer world. The assumption is the change. You do not assume in order to change the outer world. The assumption is the change. You do not assume in order to become wealthy. You assume well, and in assuming it you are wealthy, and the outer world, which can do nothing but reflect your inner state, must eventually catch up. The hardening is not something you wait for. The hardening is something you allow by remaining faithful to the state. Every time you return to the feeling of the wish fulfilled, you are strengthening the mold. Every time you refuse to react to contrary evidence, you are allowing the gold to cool and set. And when the mold is strong enough, when the gold has fully solidified, it appears in the outer world as fact. Neville said, I tell you, all things are possible to him who believes, and to believe is to assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled. It is not to hope, it is not to wish, it is to assume, to take for granted, to occupy the state as though it were already true. And if you will do this, if you will persist in this, there is no desire you cannot fulfill, no state you cannot embody, no circumstance you cannot change. But you must be vigilant. You must watch your inner conversations. Because even as you are assuming one thing in your imagination, you may be assuming its opposite in your inner speech. You may be imagining yourself successful while telling yourself you are a failure. You may be imagining yourself loved while silently rehearsing rejection. These inner conversations are assumptions too, and they have just as much power to harden into fact as the assumptions you consciously plant. So Neville taught that you must control your inner conversations. You must listen to what you are saying to yourself in the privacy of your own mind, and you must revise any conversation that contradicts the state you wish to occupy. If you catch yourself thinking, I can't afford that, revise it. Say instead, I can afford anything I desire. If you catch yourself thinking, no one loves me, revise it. Say instead, I am so loved. These are not affirmations. They are not statements you repeat in order to convince yourself. They are the natural inner speech of the state you wish to occupy. And as you speak from that state, you become that state. This is the art of assumption. It is not passive. It is not merely imagining once and then forgetting. It is a continuous occupancy of the desired state. It is living from the end in every moment you remember to do so, and forgiving yourself when you forget, and gently, patiently, lovingly returning to the state again and again until it becomes who you are. And when it becomes who you are, when you can think of the thing you once desired and feel no longing, no lack, no distance between yourself and it, then you know it is done. The assumption has hardened. The invisible has become visible. And you will see it in the outer world, not because you made it happen, but because it could not be otherwise. You are the creator, and the world you see is your creation. Let me give you one more very important key. Neville said, it is not what you want that comes to you. It is what you are. If you assume wealth, you do not attract wealth. You are wealth, and wealth appears in your experience because it cannot be otherwise for one who is wealth. If you assume love, you do not attract wealth. You are new appears in your experience because it cannot be otherwise for one. You are love, and love appears in your experience because it is the natural expression of what you are. This is why the feeling is everything. The feeling is the state. The feeling is what you are. And when you persist in the feeling, when you live in it, breathe it, sleep in it, wake in it, you become it. And when you become it, it is done. So the question is not, how long will it take for my assumption to harden into fact? The question is, how long will it take for me to become natural in the assumption? And the answer depends entirely on you. It depends on your willingness to persist, on your willingness to disregard the outer facts and live from the inner state, on your willingness to trust the law even when the senses scream that it is not working. Neville said, I know this law works because I have tested it thousands of times, and I tell you, test it for yourself. Do not believe me. Do not believe me. Test it. Assume something, feel it to be true, persist in that assumption, and watch as it hardens into fact. And when you have proved it once, assume something greater, and prove it again and again, until you know beyond any shadow of doubt that consciousness is the only reality, that your assumptions are the substance of your world, and that you are the operant power. This is the promise. This is the law. Assume it, and it will harden into fact, not because you deserve it, not because you earned it, not because you convinced the universe to give it to you, but because you are it. And what you are must express itself. Now, as we move toward the close of this episode, I want to bring you back to the simplicity of it all. Because sometimes, in talking about states and assumptions and inner speech, it can begin to feel complicated. But it is not complicated. It is the simplest thing in the world. You want something. You imagine having it. You feel the naturalness of having it. You persist in that feeling. And it becomes fact. That's it. The reason it seems difficult is because we have been taught to believe the opposite. We have been taught that the outer world is the cause and we are the effect. That things happen to us. that we are victims of circumstance, that we are victims of circumstance, that we are victims of the substance. He said, the outer world is the effect. You are the cause. Nothing happens to you. Everything happens from you. And the way to change the outer is to change the inner. This is the great teaching. This is the pearl of great price. And when you grasp it, when you really take hold of it, your entire life transforms. You stop begging. You stop waiting. You begin to assume, to claim, to imbibe, and the world, which has no will of its own, rearranges itself to match what you have claimed. So tonight, when you lie down to sleep, do this. Construct your scene. Feel the wish fulfilled. Loop it gently, sweetly, until you drift into sleep. And tomorrow when you wake, do not check the outer world to see if it has changed. Instead, return to the feeling. Live from the end. Be the one to whom the thing is already true. And do this day after day, night after night, until the state you are assuming is more real to you than the state you seem to be leaving behind. And if you find yourself doubting, if you find yourself slipping back into the old state, do not condemn yourself. Neville said, be like the potter who sees a crack in the vessel and simply molds it again. Your consciousness is the clay. Your assumption is the mold. And you can shape it and reshape it as many times as you need until it holds the form you desire. There is no failure in this law, only delay. And the delay is in you. It is in the time it takes for you to become natural in the assumption, to drop the old state and fully occupy the new one. But every time you return to the feeling, you are shortening that delay. Every time you refuse to react to the outer facts, you are allowing the assumption to harden. And one day, sooner than you think, you will turn around and the thing will be there. Not because you waited for it, but because you became it. This is the secret. This is the law. Assume it, and it will harden into fact. You are not powerless. You are not at the mercy of the world. You are the creator of your world, and the power to change it is within you right now. It has always been within you. It is your own wonderful human imagination, and it is the own wonderful human imagination, and it is the only God there is. So go now and test it. Choose something. Anything you have it. Feel it to be true. Persist in that assumption, and when it hardens into fact, and it will choose something greater, and prove the law again and again, until you know, not as a belief, not as a hope, but as a living, breathing certainty, that you are the operant power, that consciousness is the only reality, and that the world you see is nothing but your own assumptions pushed out. You are not a person hoping for a better life. You are the creator, imagining the life you will experience. And every assumption you make, every state you occupy, is hardening even now into the facts you will encounter tomorrow. So assume the best, assume the fulfillment of every desire, assume the state you long to occupy, and persist. Persist until the assumption is natural, until it is effortless, until it is simply who you are. And when that day comes, you will look back and realize that the thing you longed for was never out there waiting for you. It was within you all along, waiting only for your recognition, your assumption, your permission to appear. This is the teaching. This is the truth. Assume it, and it will harden into fact. Go and prove it for yourself.